I shared this last week as well, but for me, digitalization is basically the transition from the value delivery pattern on the left, which is I buy a car, I use the car for several years, the car gets a little bit worse every day I use it, and then I buy the next car, to the model on the right, where basically every product, whether it's a medical product from Getinge, or it's a software product, or it is another type of product like Spotify, for instance, because I remember that Lena was at Spotify at some point when she was still young and innocent, if I'm not mistaken. We're moving towards a model that is we see on the right, where basically the day the customer gets the product, it is the best we can build it, but it is also the worst it will be throughout the rest of its economic life. And from that point on, the product will get a little bit better every day we use it by new software deployment, DevOps, new machine learning models, MLOps, perhaps periodically upgrading electronics, or perhaps occasionally replacing mechanics. That's the model that I see that many of the software-centered companies are moving towards, even if not everyone is there yet in their respective industry. The traditional model has been, we build what says in the specification, and then we assume that if we build what it said in the spec, we have delivered value to customers. And I believe that this is a complete misunderstanding and a fallacy of many of the traditional approaches, including the different agile methods like SAFe and related, because our research and research by others shows that somewhere between half and 2/3 of all the features in a typical system are never used or used so seldomly that they shouldn't have been built in the first place. And this is our own research with a company in the Gothenburg region that wanted to stay anonymous when they saw the data. They basically we see exactly the same pattern here. Some customers, some features are used all the time, some features are used occasionally. Many features are never used or hardly ever used and shouldn't have been built. And these are features, just to remind everyone, this is not the airbag feature in your car that you hope will never be activated, because that would mean you would be in an accident. These are features where some product managers stood hopping up and down saying that unless we build this thing, we're all going to go to hell in a handbasket. Yeah, so that's where we're coming from. And then I shared the 3-layer product model: layer of commodity, layer of differentiation, the layer of innovation. And our data shows that somewhere between 70 and 90% of all resources in a typical software development company go to commodity functionality, stuff that no customer gives a flying hoot about. Yeah, so the current state of R&D, as far as I can determine, and again, for those of you that were here last week, this is a little bit of a refresher, but it's not new. 7 to 9 out of every 10 in R&D work on commodity stuff that no customer cares about. It should just work. And the 1 or 2 that build new stuff get it wrong half the time. So in my view, the effectiveness of R&D today in most companies, and if I say effectiveness is the amount of value you create for every unit of R&D that you invest, is simply atrocious. It's awful. And I feel that we need to move to something else. And what is that something else? That's exactly what I want to talk with all of you about. I already raised, and Bjarke was referring to this, the model that I presented last time, and that also went out on LinkedIn and in my newsletter, from traditional, that we all understand doesn't work and is really not the thing, and it still happens a lot. I mean, if you go to SAP Defense, they write a contract, they have 12,000 requirements, they build the 12,000 requirements, they get it ticked off by the customer, and they get paid. That's their model. Then we have Agile, which many of you are either applying in your day-to-day work, or you are making a living as an Agile coach or something like that, because I noticed that there were a number of people that were earning their money in applying Agile practices, which is all around individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change, etc. To what I believe are the key elements of the next paradigm, which is much more about architecture and decoupling teams. There is nothing more expensive than coordinating through meetings, through people talking to each other. It's much cheaper to coordinate through architecture. Operational software that is tracked in real time, so we get data and we know that the software is doing what it's supposed to do or not in real time. Predicting stakeholder needs. Agile, in my view, is very reactive, trying to respond to what customers say that they want or what happens in the ecosystem. I want to be proactive. You don't want to wait until customers ask for something. You want to make your customer. I mean, there's a great American saying that says, make your kids want what you're getting them for Christmas. I'm not sure if you've heard that one, but the idea basically is you have to make your customers want what you want to build for them. And then finally, rather than setting a requirement, we believe much more in hypotheses and experimentation. So that's at least what I believe the next paradigm. That's just some of the elements that I believe the next paradigm has to include. But as one of my favorite sayings is, I've been married long enough to know how often I'm wrong. I have organizing these meetings because I'm trying to understand to what extent how are you thinking about these kind of questions? Yeah, so this is where I wanted to, I'm gonna skip this one, but now very quickly for Bjarke and for Dulce. I want to shift the focus from only focusing on how are we going to build this to including what we're going to build and why should we build it in the first place. And from a focus on efficiency, how do we crank out as many features per time unit as possible, to effectiveness, how do we create as much customer value as possible per time R&D unit. From talking about value, I was at this customer last week and they were shouting that they need this feature because otherwise, instead of talking about it, it's about measure frequency of use, measure the value that the customer gets out of this stuff. Reacting to change, to being proactive and listening to what customers say they want, to measuring what customers actually do in practice. I mean, for those of you that have a little bit of management literature, there's this beautiful thing between espoused theory, this is what customers say or what people say they do, versus theory and use. This is what people do in reality and in practice. And those things, I think, have to be separated.